Thank you so much for inviting me. And actually, I'm talking now on behalf of the OECD, not Denmark. I am a member of the executive committee of the OECD lead committee, and it is as such that I'm addressing you today. Later on one of the sessions, I will also have the opportunity to give you an impression of what we actually are doing in Denmark. The OECD lead has a long tradition for working together with the WAPES, and we are very pleased actually to work together with WAPES since we in many ways shares the same approach to how to manage actually and develop the public employment service. Today, this morning, however, I will try to broaden out the approach. As you can see, the theme of my presentation is balancing flexibility and accountability. And Hugh has been into this, but for us, it's not so much a question of decentralization as how do you actually enable the public employment service and other local actors to adjust to the challenges you have at local level and be flexible in the delivery of your services according to the challenges that you actually have in your locality. And you see, you can have a decentralized system that basically do not have any flexibility. In theory, I don't think it's very often so, but so therefore we think you have to broaden the approach. And on the other hand, you also have to realize what does it mean to have a centralized or decentralized system in relation to national and regional priorities. For us, it's a question of how do you balance the responsibility towards national priorities and local challenges. And in that way, we actually use the term accountability, that you have to be accountable to those who provide funds for you, and you have to be accountable, of course, also to the national priorities set by your national parliament and the politicians at national level. So this is our approach. And our approach is also that when you look at economic development and economic policies at local level, you also have to look at all the other actors. That means that employment policy is not only the responsibility of the employment service, it's also the responsibility, of course, of education, of industrial development, agencies, and so on. And the flexibility of the public employment service should ideally actually enable the employment service to be an integrated player at the local level, working together with other agencies that actually have the responsibility in common to develop your locality. And this is what I'm trying to go into now. But first, a little on, see if this works, the OECD LEAD program, because this, I think you should maybe have an understanding of what we are working with. First of all, we are 37 member countries. It's not only OECD countries, it's also what we call pre-accession members to the OECD that can be member of the OECD. Actually, at the moment, we are discussing with Russia and trying to encourage Russia to be part of the OECD LEAD committee. The themes of our committee is, as I mentioned, not only the employment service. It's employment and skills, it's entrepreneurship, the social economy, economic development, and governance. And the focus is how to develop the local level. That's why it's called local economic and economic development. And that's actually a little different from the general OECD approach, which normally is a national approach. But we have realized in order to actually improve the effect of the national policies, you have to have more focus on how the policies are actually implemented at a local level. And that's why we established this committee. The committee actually has a forum on partnerships, so we involve many partners at local and regional level from other countries, and we have 2,900 members in 61 countries. So it's actually an active organization, not only a research institution. It's actually an active organization actually taking part in many of local policy programs in many countries. And we also work with private companies and so on. Maybe to give you an impression, a very concrete impression of our approach, I will quote actually one of our American from Texas, one of our partners in the forum, who actually stated this: 20 years ago, local agencies were simply responding to local issues as they came up. We needed an integrated vision if we were to transform our economic fortunes. Flexibility from the state government allowed us to develop this vision, and now all the local agencies work more closely together to deliver real results for the area. And this is basically what it's about. And here, of course, the Employment Service plays a very important role as one of the partners at local level. But we are all here actually, our main purpose, of course, is to improve the employability and the employment of our population at local and, of course, also regional and national level. So what is flexibility? And our definition of that is actually the same as Hugh was mentioning. It is to make it better adapted to local contexts, actions carried out by other organizations, strategies being pursued, and challenges and opportunities. This is our definition of flexibility, the possibility to adjust policy. And what do we mean by flexibility? And again, I think that Hugh also was into this. We have a number of areas where we think it's necessary to actually have flexibility in order to design the relevant programs at local level. First of all, of course, program design, how you mix your programs, how you actually mix the programs in relation to target groups. Also that you can provide programs outside the normal portfolio if that's necessary. And also that you can adapt to local general employment strategies, not only involving the employment service. A second thing is financing. I don't want to go so much into that, but actually that you have the flexibility to actually finance the necessary initiatives. It's not the same as going beyond your budget. Of course, that's actually the other side of accountability. Of course, you have to respect your budget. And if you need further budget, then of course maybe you can get some local contribution to activities. But flexibility in financing is not the same as flexibility in your budget. And this is about professionalism. How do you actually optimize the budget you actually have by financing the activities that are necessary? Then, of course, target groups. It's necessary to actually specify your target groups at local level. There are differences also in Russia between, I think, Moscow and rural areas and you have different challenges for different groups. And then you also have to have goals and performance management adjusted to the local area and combined with actually other actors. And you also have to have, in relation to that, performance assessment, not only based on quantitative criteria, but also qualitative criteria. Actually, how do you basically improve the delivery of service? And then also you need freedom for collaboration, integration of policies. And you have to be flexible in order to actually, for instance, if we look at the cooperation with education, sometimes the educational system approach the enterprises and the employment service actually approach the enterprises. To be effective, maybe you should have a common service and cooperate on how to support the enterprises in order for them to get the right employees. And then you should also have the ability to outsource. That means actually to be able to not to outsource your services instead of delivering themselves if you find that somebody else, agencies, are actually more capable of delivering these services. And then finally, I haven't lined this up, finally, of course, you also need to have some kind of flexibility in the recruitment of your staff. If you need, in some areas, you might need qualified people that are able to take care of people with high education, and in other areas, you need qualified people that are able to take, actually to handle low qualified people. So that's just an example. And why is local flexibility important also in the management of PES? First of all, I said you need to respond to local variation. Here I give you a map of the UK, and you can see there are huge differences in unemployment rates and also in the composition of the unemployment. So basically, I think it's an obvious observation. And what is also interesting is to look into what are the features actually that facilitate policy integration. What does it take actually to be able to integrate policies? And we have within the OECD lined up a number of features actually, and you can see flexibility is the most important. If you want policy integration and you want your agency to be able to interact with other agencies, then flexibility is important. But another thing is, of course, local governance. You have to have a political or managerial system that actually is able to manage and set goals and frame for the initiatives. Then you also, at national level, need cooperation. If you have silos, you have the educational system, the employment system, the industrial development system at national level. Of course, it's important that they actually also integrate their approaches to the local level. If you have strict command lines down the silos from the national level, it actually means that the local system also look upward and not horizontal in order to cooperate. So there have to be support from the national level. Then, of course, you need to have capacity. You cannot ask an agency to cooperate with you or adapt to special challenges if they basically don't have the capacities. That can be the manpower, that can be the qualifications, and so on. So that's also important. And finally, of course, the labor market conditions as such also facilitate or creates a possibility for flexibility. And if you see the correlation between the degree of policy coordination and integration and the degree of flexibility, you'll see that there is a clear, connection between flexibility and the degree of policy coordination. It's not totally clear. For instance, you can see, what is it, Australia, I think. Yeah, Australia. You can see there is a little contradiction. But in general, if you see the line, actually, you will see that there is a clear correlation between flexibility and policy coordination. And actually, we did a survey or actually a research program to see whether we have evidence for this. And we looked specifically into the employment service. And we saw that there is a positive and statistically significant related connections to the employment rate and the flexibility within the employment service. That means the more flexible the employment service is, in the definition of flexibility as we have, the more effective the employment program. And how do we measure that? We measure it through what we call the ultimate goal for the employment policy, the employment rate of the population. And there we can see that there is a statistical evidence. And actually the correlation is that when you have 1 point increase in flexibility in the OECD flexibility index, you will have an increase in employment rate of 1.64%. And that for us in the OECD actually is one of the most important things that we actually have evidence for what we are recommending. And I think that's basically also something that we should use within the employment service, evidence-based policies. So this is, of course, a strong argument for flexibility also within the employment service. Then I also mentioned the question of accountability, that you cannot just have flexibility in an open space. You need to have some frameworks, budget frameworks, political framework, and political conditions. And how do we balance this? First of all, I think Hugh was also mentioning this, we have to negotiate local targets so that they actually live up also to national goals. And you also have to be aware of that you cannot just distribute flexibility and independence. What our experience is that you have to do it specifically and also maybe gradually if you don't have experience with it. And there are also regions and areas that don't have the capacity so that you can just grant general flexibility and independence. In my country and in other countries, we have started by giving flexibility to the big cities because they have the capacity and so on. And then we have gradually worked with the localities. Then we also, and I think that's important, has to boost what we call horizontal accountability. When you work at the local level, we have to have common goals and feel mutually accountable to these goals. Again, if I take a simple example, if you have the vocational educational system focusing on the skilled workers and improving their qualifications, and our focus and our goal is actually to upgrade the low-skilled, unskilled workers, you can see at local level there will be a contradiction. So you need to actually find also what we call horizontal common goals. And then a final thing that maybe is sometimes underestimated is using data. You need to have a very, very elaborated data system so that you can actually first of all, follow your activities, relate them to the goals, and also have access to the data. And they have to be actual. And this is one of the biggest challenges within the employment service, to have an actual database that can be used both for planning, and for performance management, and also for actually integrating the knowledge base for the locality. And I cannot stress this enough. You can have a lot of plans and so on. If you don't have data, if you don't have a common idea of your challenges, and you are not able to actually assess your development and your outcomes, then it's not that easy to say it in a mild way. So then, just to give an idea of how flexibility look in different contexts that we have been working with. And if you look at the different countries that we have been very much into, there are also others. There's also my country, but it's an older study, so I wouldn't go into that. You will see that this is the findings that we have. On the one end, we have the United States and Belgium, Flanders, and on the other end, we have Australia. Australia is a little outside the picture, so to speak. I don't understand. There must be some kind of flexibility there as well. They are performing relatively well in terms of employment, so maybe they have other ways of actually adjust to the local conditions. But otherwise, you will see that there is a clear correlation also between how the countries perform and actually the flexibility in the management of employment programs. And finally, I just want to stress an example from the United States, because if you look at the performance indicators also during the crisis and actually the handling of the crisis, it's interesting to see that US in many states actually have tackled the crisis with relatively success. They have had improvement in employment, improvement in employment rates, and so on. And if you look at the situation in 1998, the so-called local investment boards who were responsible for following the employment and training service in a given area had a relatively rigid budget situation. And from then, and now, actually, in 2014, based on many of the findings of the OECD, the US has streamlined their organization. They have given the so-called workforce investment boards more responsibility, and I think it's interesting actually to maybe give the workforce investment boards some more words, because the workforce investment boards in the US, they are sub-regional. Actually consist of actors from employment, from industrial development, and from education, and also from some of the social security agencies. So they have a cross-sectoral workforce investment approach. And take notice of the word workforce investment. That is not only employment and how to get people the fastest way into employment. It is about investing in your workforce in order to improve their employability. And that is a broader approach that apparently gives better outcomes in terms of employment. And I think it's important for the employment service to have this understanding that it's not only about bringing people who are unemployed into work. It is about constantly focus on investing in your workforce so that the workforce is able to live up to the demands and standards of of the employment that we really want. And the positive thing is that if you have this approach, we can also document that it gives you the best outcomes. Okay, thank you very much.